Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Low Budget Review Show. Sometimes we're upside down. I am your host, Eric Smith, and today I am talking about With Teeth by Brian Keene. This is from, there it is, Death's Head Press, a publisher that you should be paying attention to. They got great covers, great authors, lots of great stuff going on with Death's Head. And this is latest-ish from Brian Keene, and it's a vampire novel. You got some middle-aged guys, and there's money troubles, and they've been friends forever. Some of them doing better than others. Some of them are married, some of them are not. Some of them have jobs, some of them don't. They're always getting together. They're in a rural area, and so there's some money troubles coming up, and they decide maybe they're going to manufacture and sell meth. And one of them, well, there's a couple cousins, and their grandfather was a moonshiner, and he used to had his moonshining going on in this hollow. And so they think, well, no one ever bothered him there. I don't think anybody ever goes out there. Let's check it out and see if that's a good place to set up a meth lab. And they find vampires, and all hell breaks loose. So that's it in a nutshell. What to say about this tiny little book? It's only, let's see. The main story. And you might ask, why am I saying the main story? 98 pages long. And I say the main story because there are two short stories in here as well. But let's talk about the main story. It is being told by one of the characters. I think his name is Frank, if I remember correctly. I thought for a while he was never going to be named, but then one of the other characters is like, "Hey, Frank." And he's like, and I turned around and looked at who was calling my name. But he's telling the story, and this is, to me, it felt like someone spinning a yarn. The way he speaks, or, narrates, tells the story, however you want to look at it, has a down-home charm to it, for lack of a better term. I was very much reminded of Joe Lansdale's writing. A lot of stuff, especially the short stories that I read by Lansdale, I get that feeling of sitting around a campfire and someone's telling a story. That's the exact same feeling that I got with this. So the characters are pretty well fleshed out for such a short book, as our narrator, Frank, introduces us to each of his pals and or relatives. We get a little backstory. We learn about who they were growing up, where the place they are now in their lives, why they've sort of gotten to this point where they're talking about, they haven't made the final decision yet, but they're actually considering maybe dealing some meth. So, it's Brian Keene, so it's well written, of course, and the characters are interesting, of course. And then when we get to the vampires, it's 98 pages. I can't tell you too much, but they're interesting, of course. And what happens to these lifelong friends that are now confronted with this horrible darkness that has teeth. It's interesting. It's horrifying. I love the ending of the story. It's primo Brian Keene. If you're a fan, you're going to love this, I think. And if you're not a fan, and I don't mean like you're anti-Brian Keene, if you just haven't made up your mind yet or haven't read anything, this isn't a bad place to start. Again, it's short, so you get a nice, quick taste of how Brian Keene writes, what his stories are like, and it's a great story to it's a great story to start with. I mean, I think you can start with almost anything. I mean, don't read a sequel before you read the first one. He's got a couple things that, are 2 or 3 books long. So, don't read City of the Dead before you read The Rising. But anyway, But you could essentially you could start with almost anything. His stuff is very accessible, but this is not a bad place to start. It's brand new. It's easy to get. You can get it directly from Death's Head, and which I recommend always if you can buy from the small press before you buy from Amazon, if you can. So yeah, I don't know. Oh, so there's 2 short stories in here. One I had read before. I think it's in an anthology edited by Christopher Golden that I read. It's all vampire stories. I think that's the one that it's in. I can't remember the name of the... Seize the Night, I want to say, is the name of the anthology, but I'm not 100% sure. But I think that's where I read this first story. It's the 2 short stories are both vampire stories. And that's called The Last Supper. So it's quick read. It's short, thus short story. So no problem reading it a second time. Still enjoyable. And then the second story, which I had not read before, is called Down Under. Do you need to know what these short stories are about? The Last Supper is a post-apocalyptic vampire story. The Down Under is about there's a quarry or a mine that's been flooded out, and there's some missing kids. So these divers have to go down under the water to see if they can find where these 2 missing kids went to. Maybe find and recover their bodies. And well, it's a vampire story. So there you go. There is before the 2 short stories, there's a little afterword by Brian Keene where he talks about how everything he's written is interconnected, which is true. There actually, is it in Down Under that there's a reference to... Basically, I believe it's in Down Under, there's a reference to the events of With Teeth, or Tease, or something. Or maybe With Teeth has a reference. I don't know, there's references. But you don't need to have read anything else. That's one of the really nice things. Until you get to his actual newest book, which is up for pre-order until July 4th, the limited edition hardcover from Thunderstorm Books. I believe it's the 7, the Labyrinth Book 1. That one is like a culmination, or it's going to be a 7-book series. It's a culmination of everything he's written. So if you're going to order that, you probably need to have read, and you don't have to, but you're going to miss a lot. So you probably need to have read the other stuff he's written. As for everything else, it all ties together, but you do not have to have read anything else. There's just little crossover characters, little references. He talks about his biggest inspiration, or one of his biggest inspirations, is Marvel Comics. And, you can read Spider-Man without having to read every other Marvel comic, but there are going to be, Spider-Man mentioned Doctor Strange, or trying to think of Doctor Doom shows up, and he's an FF villain. So, but you don't have to read that stuff. I'm really rambling, I realize. But I don't know. So, anyway, I gave this 5 out of 5 on Goodreads. I highly recommend it. You don't have to have read any other Brian Keene, but really, you should be reading all of Brian Keene. But there are Easter eggs. Everything he has takes place in a vast multiverse. Again, I got to stop saying things like that. Just, this book stands on its own. You should read it. It's fantastic. There you go. I just like to talk about Brian Keene and his work. So, With Teeth by Brian Keene from Death's Head Press. 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I love that cover. And I'm going to stop. That's it. What else do you need to know? I suppose I could just say, if you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put them in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. We try to be polite here at the Low Budget Review Show. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you'd care to follow me on other social media, my Twitter is @Ronin5757. My Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comics, board games, and Fuzzy Animals is Eric Smith 5757. That's Eric with a K, ERIKSMITH 5757. That's all I've got. This has been the Low Budget Review Show. I have been Eric Smith, and until next time, read more books.